Hello and welcome to Stories of a Sea ? Podcast. Today we're joined by Lisa Tremble, who is the CPO of British Airways. Lisa, I will come to you in a second so you can do a very brief introduction. But as some of our listeners will know, the purpose of this podcast is to interview and to talk to a number of the people that we know within the C-suite. And therefore, we're delighted to be joined by Lisa today. Please remember, if you've watched these before and you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe below. We hopefully, I'm not talking about hopefully, we're going to have a brilliant podcast today because I know that Lisa's got an amazing story to talk about. So today, Natasha is my co-host, who's the CEO of Oliver Sanderson, and I'm a director at Oliver Sanderson. So Lisa, over to you. Do you want us to give us a quick 30-second intro?
So, as you said, I work at British Airways. I've worked here for 4 years. I joined as Chief Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Officer. And after a year, I added the people team to my brief. So I currently look after people, corporate affairs and sustainability. I'm a mum. I have 3 children, a long-suffering husband who I actually met when I was 16 years old. And for those, some of you might have noticed my accent. I'm a very proud Northerner.
Very good. And I didn't know that's something new I've learned about you today, Lisa, that you met your husband at 16. Wow.
I did, yeah.
That's amazing.
Long-suffering husband as well.
Yeah. Well, probably not that long. Come on, we're not that old, are we, Lisa?
A few years.
Right. So, Lisa, we talked a few weeks ago as we were talking about this podcast and about your story, and you came up with a really great phrase that I wanted to start with today, and that phrase was very simply, "Why not me?" Why not me is like, often we think about ourselves and we think about like the path that we're supposed to be on, but do we actually stop and take stock of where we actually are and ask ourselves those challenging, thought-provoking questions, which you obviously did. When did "Why not me" start for you?
Yeah, look, I think probably it started at a relatively young age for me. So I was brought up in a town called Workington, a very working class town in the northwest of England, very close to the Lake District. And actually, I was very conscious at the time that there wasn't a lot of kind of aspiration when you went to school. I think I was super lucky that both my mum and my dad worked in a factory, my mum worked in a shop, and I can always remember them being really, really strict about sticking at school, move away from Workington. You know, there's a whole world out there and we want you to go and live in that world. So I think, yeah, for me, it was something that was probably ingrained from a young age to just think about different opportunities that were available out there. And definitely my parents, even though they hadn't really experienced any of what I would say the professional working life, they definitely knew that there was more out there than just living in Workington and then doing what they did. So I think probably the term "why not me" didn't kind of come to fruition till later in my career, but certainly something in me that was kind of a restlessness, I guess, about trying new things and just pushing myself forward to see what happened.
Very good. So look, often we don't sit there and think about these things. And sometimes these phrases do come to us later on in life. So Natasha, I'm going to hand over to you now to ask Lisa the next question.
Thank you, James. So, Lisa, after university, you then actually went into a career that was aligned with your degree, and this spanned many years. And then what happened? Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, so it's interesting actually, because when I was doing my A levels, and I'm really conscious that there's lots of kids that have kind of got their A level results quite recently. I actually didn't. I applied to do English and law. That's what I wanted to do when I went to university. I didn't get the grade that I needed in English. I got a C rather than the A that was predicted. I went through the clearance system and I ended up doing a completely different course than the one I'd originally envisaged doing. So kind of life lesson to everyone. honestly, it doesn't matter. You think that it really matters when you're 18 and the course that you've intended to do is the be all and end all. But actually, crazy things happen in life and it's how you react to them. So actually when I went through clearance, I decided actually I didn't want to go down the English stroke law route, and I chose to do society and government. I went to Aston University in Birmingham, and that did actually really ignite my interest in public policy and politics. So it definitely set my career in a slightly different direction. When I finished university, I applied for quite a lot of jobs, as most graduates do. I think it was just as tough back then as it is now in terms of the amount of applications you have to make. And I got like so many rejections, and the most frustrating rejection that you always got was like, oh, thanks, but you don't have any experience. And you're like, my goodness, I'm 21. I've just studied full time. Of course, I haven't got any experience. So I went back home to Workington. I moved in with my mum and dad again. They were delighted, obviously. And my first break came by complete accident. I was in Marks and Spencer's with my mum, and she knew Tony Cunningham, who at the time was the member of European Parliament. And she said, will you give our Lisa a job for 3 months? And he did. And that actually started my working career, and it basically started my interest in politics. So I went over to Brussels for 3 months to work for Tony Cunningham in his private office. I did, as you can imagine, everything that I was told to do: photocopying, opening the mail, organising, doing diaries, lots of admin tasks. That 3 months led to 6 months with another MEP, and then that 6 months role ended up in a permanent role out there in Brussels. So that's really how my career started, by happy coincidence, I think, rather than a really strict plan. And then in 97, there was a big election. Some of you old enough will remember that. I decided I wanted to come back to the UK, sent my CV off to, oh my goodness, so many MPs. And then I was interviewed by Charles Clarke, who at the time was the Norwich South MP. He offered me the job, and then over the next kind of decade, he became a cabinet minister. And that's how I started my career as a special advisor to Labour ministers in the Labour government, 97 to 2010.
Wow, that's really interesting and really different to what most CPOs. Your story is really unique. So further success, having moved away from your comfort zone into different industries and roles, you're now actually the CPO of British Airways, which is our home brand, and we're all really proud of British Airways as a business. So tell us a little bit about that and your journey as a CPO.
Yeah, so I often look back on my career and think, gosh, it's kind of a set of happy coincidences. I'd love to say like I was so super strategic that I sat there at, the age of 21 and planned everything out. I definitely wasn't one of those people that sat and planned everything out, but I do think that there was always a method behind the madness. So look, the reason I ended up at British Airways is really because I moved in to do a corporate communications and sustainability role. And that was a set of experiences that I'd built up throughout my career. So when I first went into government as a special advisor, I dealt with media, crisis, policy, comms. When I moved out of politics in 2010, I then went into consultancy, and I advised corporate clients on campaigning, on basically fixing problems, on crisis. And then I gradually moved into, it was then known as CSR, corporate social responsibility, but starting to advise clients on sustainability strategies and how to give back. So I think, look, throughout my career, I kind of used comms as the basis to apply for a job, but then each job I built something additional into the mix. So by the time I came to apply for the role at British Airways, when I looked at the job description, I was like, you know what, actually, I've done all of these things throughout my career. I'm going to go for this job. back to the original opening. Why not me? I can do this. I'm going to give this a go. And that's exactly what I did. So that was kind of the first step into the company. And around a year into that brief, the CPO at the time decided to leave. And I actually took over the people brief on an interim basis. And that was super interesting. And I often look back at that moment and think, well, if that job had been put in front of me and someone said, would you apply for that job? I probably would have said, oh, no, I can't do that job because I have never been a CPO. Even though there was definitely things within the brief that I could see that I could get my arms around and drive. But the fact that it was an interim position, so I was immediately stepping up into something to basically help the company do the right thing, that felt like it was something that I wanted to do and that I could get my arms around. So, yeah, so I did spend around a year being the interim chief people officer before I then realised, oh, I am actually doing this job. So therefore, that's when I accepted the job on a permanent basis. But it is interesting when you look back and kind of think about the different barriers that you create for yourself. And the first barrier when I applied for British Airways was, would I be good enough to be on a management committee, be in the C-suite? And that was a barrier that obviously I had to kind of really push myself to overcome, just kind of generate that self-belief, like, why not me? And then I look back often and think, my goodness, I was scared to take on one big job. And then all of a sudden I'm doing the role of two C-suite members. So often it is your own mind that can really kind of stop you from kind of taking a jump. And when you get opportunities, the one thing I would say about myself, if someone asks me to do something or there's an opportunity, I will just think, oh, why not? Go for it and worry about the consequences later. And over time, you realise that actually, like, most people can do anything that they want to do if they're given their opportunity and they just give it a go. And when you're stuck, you can always ring someone and ask their advice.
It's really amazing and such a fascinating story, and great, the whole mindset thing about how people should shift their mindset if they want to be someone, then believe in themselves. That's really great advice, Lisa. So moving on to the next question. Often people look at successful careers and don't always realize how this impacts other parts of their lives. And
Mm.
how have you managed this? And what was that impact? How's that impact been?
Yeah, it's like the perennial question, what is work-life balance? And I honestly don't know what the answer is. I definitely don't think that you have balance anywhere in your life when you've got a family and you've got a career. You basically just have a set of things that you need to do, and you have to almost like negotiate the order in which you do them. And I think that's something. So, as I said at the beginning, I've got 3 children. My eldest is 21, just about to turn 21 next month. Millie. Holly is 16. She's just started sixth form. And Max is 10. He's just started year 6. So I've kind of got a range of ages there. They all want something different. And actually, it really matters to me to have a great relationship with my kids. I always wanted to be a mum. I love being a mum to those 3, and they'll always be the proudest thing that I ever do in my life. So it's important that I actually work with them so I understand what they want from me and they understand what my barriers and boundaries are. So, I sit down and say, like, what is it that you definitely want me to do with you? So I'll tell you a funny story. I had this conversation with my little boy, Max. He's only 10. He knows that I work. My husband doesn't work. He stays at home. So he's very conscious that I work. And last year he came back from school and he was like, oh, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And he was like, what do you want first? I was like, oh, I think let's go with the bad news first and then go on to the good news. He's like, oh, the bad news is I've been selected for the Recorder concert and parents are invited. And I was like, okay, so what's the good news? He was like, yeah, you don't have to come because I'm just going to stick it in my mouth, move my fingers. I'm not really going to play. So you don't need to come because I'd prefer you to come to something else. And I thought, you know what? That's a really interesting thing that he'd caught on to at the age of 9. He realised that there was like a limited number of things that I can do. So he'd actually selected which one that he wanted me to do. And we had that kind of conversation. And very similar with my girls as well. They tell me exactly what's a non-negotiable, and I will be there. If I say I'm going to be there, I'll make sure that I am there because I said I would be. And then on other things, they just accept that either no one goes to it or dad goes to it. So it is about basically creating your own boundaries and deciding how you want to negotiate everything, both at work and with your family, and having those really honest conversations as well about when you can be there and when you can't be there. And, you know, I genuinely believe that no one can be on 24/7 either. So anyone that pretends like, oh, I can be at work 24/7, I'm always switched on, like that isn't a healthy place to be. So actually making sure that you've got the right kind of I won't use the word balance because balance kind of creates an impression that you can divide everything up equally and it always works. But as long as you've got boundaries, you can work within those boundaries and make sure that you get what you need from each part of your life. But it takes work to do that, and you've got to really focus on it.
And it's fascinating because it seems to be, Lisa, that the balance and well-being is such a massive topic in the corporate world, as we know,
Yeah.
right? Understandably so, especially with everything that's happened since 2020. Let's not dwell on 2020 that long, but everything that's happened there, balance has become really important, and juggling that, working from home, number of days in the office, and I don't know what British Airways does, but number of days in the office, working from home, kids, family, mum and dad maybe both working from home at the same time, has become a real challenge in getting it right, and people struggle to figure it out because, you know, we sit there and we say, you know, balance, everyone should have a balance, yes,
Yeah.
but balance to one person might mean something completely different to somebody else. And that's often a topic of conversation. So just on that, you know, it feels like you've defined that nicely as a family unit in how you've done that, involving everybody. And I think that's a really interesting point to just to dwell on a minute, because I think so many people struggle to do that. You know, I have found with my kids, but they're like these things called mobile phones where everyone is expected to be on all of the time, and it's causes problems and issues with getting it all right. So I don't know if you want to,
Yeah.
if you can share what British Airways does or
Yeah.
what your advice is around it.
Yeah, like I'll sort of kind of jump in and tell, like, it's not a straight line, right? It's not an easy thing to describe to someone. Like, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you can get the balance right.
Mm.
The other thing I should add into this is don't forget about yourself. Like, I think kind of as a woman, you often think, okay, well, I've got kids, I've got a husband, I've got a group of friends, I've got a job. Like, how do I fit all that in? And then in amongst all of that, you are always like the secondary factor in those decisions. And I think as your jobs get bigger and more stressful, it's so important to think about what you actually need in a situation as well. And that's something I think I was a little bit late to the party with. If I'm perfectly honest, I would like do everything for everyone first, and then I'd be like, oh, like I'm burnt out here, I'm exhausted. What about me? So that's something like I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, I've really been quite strict at kind of seeing to myself, well, what do I need to do? Do I
Mm.
really want to go out for dinner that night? Or do I need to just get my pajamas on, sit in front of the television and watch nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I approach it is basically to really think about what are all the things that I want to do? What are all the things that I need to do? And what are all the things that I just do because I don't know why, I just do them. Um, I'm a little bit of a list person as well. And I sometimes think kind of the actual writing down and creating lists really help you to think through what the right approach is for you. And you do quite quickly realize you just do a lot of stuff for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're
Yeah.
like, okay, why am I running round on a Saturday morning, taking my kids to half a dozen classes that they actually whinge about going to and actually cost me money, for example? Right? We all do it because like you want to like, oh, I'm going to give my kids all the best opportunities to do all these things. And you realize actually they'd rather just be at home with their feet up or like playing on an iPad or having a chat with you. So I think there's a little bit of kind of thinking through like what really do you create just because you think it's the right thing versus what really everyone else wants you to do. And then I think kind of know your limits as well. So there'll be sometimes like, you know, it is a pretty stressful job at times working for British Airways. And sometimes that can feel quite overwhelming. And the truth is, when I feel overwhelmed by things, then I'm not really going to be productive. So the best thing to do is take a little bit of a step back and come back at it with a fresh mind. And so that's another tip I always say. I use it myself and I recommend it to my team. When it all feels overwhelming and you feel like you can't take any more, that's probably because in that moment that you can't. So kind of walk away from it, go and do something else and be present in that thing. Like, don't just go home and be with the kids and then be on your phone and get more and more stressed. Like, stop, walk away, do something else, think about something else. And then there's so few times that the next day you don't come back and go, oh, yeah, actually, it wasn't that deep. I'll do this, this, and this. So there's a little bit for me about recognizing when you get to the edge, stopping yourself, bringing it back, doing something else, and then coming back to it 24 hours later. That makes quite a difference. And then my final point on this is I think the mistakes that I definitely made for a number of years when the kids were younger is that I used to want to get back and be with them and pick them up for nursery and things like that. But I never actually switched off. So I'd go back, I'd pick them up, I'm like all het up because I left work early and there was something to do. And then I'm in the nursery, I'm like, come on, get your bag, come on. I want to get home. And so actually, I'd end up having like a few dramas with the kids because that, you know, like they wouldn't put the pajamas on or they kicked off when they were going in the bath. This is obviously when they were much younger, not now. And I kind of realised now, looking back, that I think it was my anxiety rubbing off on them and the fact that I wasn't actually present with them. So they were doing that to get my attention. And I think when I recognised that, I really started to appreciate the power of presence. And even now, when I get home, if something is kicked off, I have to do something, I'll just say, oh, look, guys, I'm going to go in the other room and sort it out and come back, rather than try and deal with it in the moment with them, half in, half out, because I actually feel like that stresses me out and it probably isn't great for them either. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just work in progress.
Yeah. And look, the way of work has changed, hasn't it? We're kind of going a little bit off piste here from the why not me, but it's quite an interesting topic, Lisa,
Yeah.
because the way we work has fundamentally changed. You know, if I think back to my early careers, actually when I first met Natasha, which was 22 years ago, which is quite scary, but when we first met, we were working in recruitment at Michael Page. And yes, we used to work crazy hours, don't get me wrong, because that was the ethos of the business. However, the big differential was you went to work, you logged on to this
Yeah.
computer device.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it a
Thing.
computer device. Big thing. And then you worked all day,
Yeah.
and only if you were a manager and you had the privilege of being a manager did you have the privilege of having a BlackBerry. So you had your emails on your phone. Anybody under a manager position at Michael Page, no one had access to anything at the end of the day. So when you left the office, you shut down your computer and you walked out.
Yeah.
And that was the reality of work 25 years ago, that everybody was in the same boat.
Yeah.
Whereas now, as you rightly say, the amount of times that, I was doing exactly what you were doing, stood in the playground, waiting for the kids to finish school on a Friday afternoon at 3:00, glued to your phone, quickly responding to emails. And then they come out and you're still, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just in the middle of sending this. Whereas actually you should be present with them and go, oh, you're here, have a hug and get in the car and have a chat about their day. And that presenteeism is so important in everything we do, because we probably miss so much stuff that happens because we're glued to a phone or we're glued to something else, or we're not truly invested in that conversation. So it's fascinating.
I think that is definitely true, but it's also, I'll go like one step further, explaining why you're not present in that moment as well, because like there's genuine things occur that happen, obviously with comms at British Airways, anything can happen. So there are genuine reasons why I can't be present. And in which case I'll explain it. Then there's some things like I just like to have a relatively clear inbox. Like that is a me thing. That isn't a real thing. That's just me wanting to stay on top of it. So, if I'm doing that rather than being with my kids, then I do have a choice to be present with them and just live with the fact I've got 8 emails unopened for like 2 hours. Like the world is not going to end, Lisa. The whole world isn't going to stop. So over time, I think what I always say to women in particular, because I think we probably a little bit harsher on ourselves actually around kind of being all things to all people, is just spend just a little bit of time thinking these things through so you can get to a more manageable place where there are some boundaries. And when you find boundaries, it's like so brilliant. I mean, it really is a life-changing event, learning boundaries and managing those pretty strictly 70% of the time is a life-changing event.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, I went through it 5 years ago. I had was in a horrendous place, but boundaries was the one thing that I didn't have. And it's the one thing that I now live my life by, that says I must have my boundaries in place. But Lisa, we've talked quite a lot about kind of well-being and presenteeism and how do you manage the work? You've had a hugely successful career through politics and then into the corporate world. And as Natasha said, you're now the Chief People Officer for British Airways, a brand that is recognizable globally. I'm sure people that are listening to this are going to go, wow, we've had some really great advice around managing your balance in how do you be a CPA, but also how do you be a mum and how do you be a family person as well and a wife. What advice or hints or tips would you give anyone that has aspirations to develop their career, to grow, that maybe is sitting there thinking, actually, am I in the right job? You were in comms and you made that shift, and I know you were fortunate in you did it in an organization, but even in organizations, someone taps you on the shoulder and says, would you like to go and do this role, which is completely different to what you've been doing? It is daunting and it is worrying. So what hints or tips do you have for people from a career perspective that might have aspirations to follow as you have done in getting to the C-suite in an organization?
Yeah, so look, the one thing when I look back over my career that's always been a consistent is when I was given an opportunity, no matter how terrified I was, and don't get me wrong, there's so many times I've been like, oh my, this is the one. This is the one where I am going to fall so flat on my face. It's going to be super embarrassing. And, like my mum and dad are going to see, my kids are going to see, and like there's so many times that I've felt that. But I've never given in to that feeling. I've said, okay, well, I'd rather fall flat on my face and be really embarrassed and say sorry and go back to what I was doing before than stay in the same place. And I think that is super, super important to basically just think to yourself, if I can do this, then I can do it. So the next thing that I'm applying to do or put my hand up for, I shouldn't be able to do it, because if I could do it, I probably shouldn't apply for it. And Natasha, you'll probably see this a lot in your role as a headhunter. You know, you shouldn't be able to do all of the job that you're applying for, because otherwise, where is the learning and the stretch? And I think because I'd always been that person that would put my hand up and was convinced that I would be an epic failure, when I didn't fail, I was like, okay, well, I didn't fail. Like, I had some difficult moments. I definitely made mistakes. I learned from that. I had to ask for help or whatever it might be. You then kind of build up that muscle that kind of says to you, well, it might not be okay. That's a possibility. But last time I thought that, it was okay. So therefore, I'll give it a go. And the worst that can happen is, well, I lose my job, I go backwards, and I have to do the job I can already do. And actually, that's not a bad place to be, because actually I was quite happy doing that job. So the way I've kind of tackled it, I think, because kind of the confidence stroke imposter syndrome, I mean, I just don't think I know anyone that doesn't think they're an imposter. There's people just naturally have that fear. I think the people who really succeed find a way to fight that little demon within themselves and then give it a go. And some people choose to give in to that through fear, don't give it a go. And then they look at other people, sometimes above them, doing the job that they could have applied for and think, I could have done that better than them. And you know what? They probably could, right? They definitely would have done it differently. So the most important thing is to try, I think, and to just give it a go, because if you're not in it, you can't win it. This is what I tell myself every week with the lottery. I'm not in it. That's why I don't win it. And over time, you build up that kind of resilience and determination, I think, to basically try new things. And you can basically still get things wrong and succeed, because actually failure is part of the journey that you need to go on in order to succeed. Because if you try nothing new, you're never going to fail, right? But you're always kind of going to do the same thing. So I guess that would be my top tip. The second thing I would say is basically, like, don't be put off by failure. Don't get upset when things go wrong. Don't take everything on yourself, because I think that can sometimes act as a real barrier to stop you from doing something new if you take things too personally when it doesn't go well. And the third thing is basically just, I do this a lot, which sounds like really like I'm a depressed person, but I often think to myself, like, when I'm 100 and, you know, I'm in the care home and people are coming to visit me, like, what are the moments that I'm going to remember? You know, what are the things that really, really matter? And I actually think there's so many moments at work that you stress about and you're worried about. And like, there's no way you're ever going to remember, you know, the 3rd of March in like 1998 when someone was upset with you because they didn't like what you did. But what you will remember is if you've lived a life where you've given things a go and you've had some successes and you've had some failures and you feel proud of yourself. And look, the truth is, you know, I do feel really proud that I came from a small working class town, that I wasn't exceptional at school, if I'm honest. You know, I didn't get the A-level grades to do the thing that I wanted. I couldn't find a job when I finished university. I had to ask my mum to basically get someone she knows to give me a job. But I just kept going and I just kept believing, if I worked hard, kept trying and pushed myself, that, why not me? Why couldn't I do it? And I think if you're humble enough to know when you can't do something and ask for help, but brave enough to push yourself into doing it anyway in the hope that you don't fail, you can be really shocked at what you can achieve.
Yeah. And such amazing things for people to take away, Lisa, because it is so true that, if you don't push yourself, how are you going to grow and develop?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I often used to tell myself when I was in the corporate world was, if they don't offer me the job, then maybe I'm not ready for the job. If they do offer me the job, then they believe I'm ready for the job. And if I'm struggling with something, who do I go and ask? I go and ask the person that has given me that job and say, hey, whoever it might have been. I use Scott as an example because he was my CPO at Capita. But hey, Scott, look, I'm struggling with this. Any advice, any support? Can you give me some help, please?
Yeah.
And he's like, of course I can, James. That is my job as your boss, is to help you to succeed, because I want you to succeed. And I think that's the other thing that says, actually, if someone does tap you on the shoulder, or you go through an interview process.
That's right. Yeah.
They believe in you to do it. They see
That's
something.
the point. If you don't believe in you, all you have to do is give it a go. And if someone else believes in you, then actually do it for them if you're worried about doing it for yourself. No, it's a great point.
Yeah. And on a final note, Lisa, I would say that, inherently people don't push themselves. And therefore I would encourage people to push themselves, especially women. We still know that females in the workplace, they will scroll through a job description and go, I haven't got 9 out of 10, so therefore I'm not ready. But as you say, and as we see an awful lot with Oliver Sanderson, most people hire on a 7 out of 10 because they want growth opportunity for that person in the organization.
That is absolutely true. Like, just give it a go. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd have been lucky to have 7 out of 10 with his CPO job description for 3.5 years ago. But actually, it wasn't so far away from everything else I'd already done. And I think the thing about being a leader is, like, no one wants a leader to be a subject matter specialist in everything. Otherwise, you'd stifle and disempower your entire team. So, as you go further up, I think there's some very kind of generic leadership skills that probably outweigh the subject matter specialism that a lot of people attach to permission to go to the next level, which people should think about as well.
Yeah. Lisa, it's been amazing to have you on this podcast and to hear your story of your career to get to a CPO. You're no longer a C ? You are a CPO. And who knows? CEO coming? Who knows? Watch this space. The next challenge for Lisa.
Thank you so much for thinking of me and giving me the opportunity to chat a little bit about my career as well. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. Lisa, thank you very much for joining us. Just a reminder, please subscribe to the channel below. We've got a number of podcasts coming up with more amazing people that we're speaking to. So, Lisa, thank you again for joining. Natasha, thank you for co-hosting, and speak to you all soon.